Hello, we are Off Track Games. Our team consists of myself, Nate Dalrymple, as the producer. We have Connor Kelly, Thomas Burke, Grace Lemon, Emma Westerfield, Brandon Chow, John Emmerich, Marcus Amaya, and Matthew Schuler.
So for our problem to be solved, we decided to make a game to challenge ourselves, to research new development strategies, to learn to develop games within a group, and to create a new product for our portfolios.
The game we ultimately created is called Dungeon Train, in which players progress through mystical cars with this magical train, defeat enemies and get stronger, explore unique environments and adapt to ever-changing surroundings, prepare to defeat the conductor, the final boss, and build skills to become better, faster, and stronger. We had some measures of success to keep us on track and deliver the best possible product. We wanted to create a playable game and to create assets that could be added to our portfolios. We also wanted to focus on player retention and replayability, and to gather positive feedback for reiteration and development. We also used some key methodologies while working. We worked closely with our software, such as Unreal Engine, Jira, and GitHub, to stay focused. We also used an agile workflow to provide adaptability. We kept our scope low and expanded when we were ready, and we designated roles to each person.
We took inspiration from roguelike games. Our story and our setting was inspired by the train episode in Adventure Time. And then some of the specific games we took inspiration from were Risk of Rain 2, Vampire Survivors, and Rotato.
Here you can see some of our sketches from the initial concepting phase. On the left to the right, you can see our first character design to our final character design. On the top, you can see a sketch for the type of environment that we would be trying to communicate within the game. And on the bottom, you can see some early experimentation with the style of the game, the camera angle, and the perspective of the main character.
For enemy design, an effort was made to blend the railroad train aesthetic with a fantasy and science fiction aesthetic to create a cohesive look between the different themed levels. Additionally, inspiration was taken from artists like Bangus from Capcom in creating characters with exaggerated proportions that would properly translate to pixel art later in the game's development. Early versions of the title card were focused on locking down the composition, making sure to draw the viewer's eye while leaving room for user interface assets further along in development. To avoid a static background, it was suggested early on to create a sense of motion to the train by applying the parallax effect to the stars and planets in the screen's background. The final design of the train took inspiration from the work of artists from the French science fiction and fantasy magazine Heavy Metal, particularly Mobius, whose art style and panel-heavy approach to spaceship design was a massive influence on the train's final design and rendering. Each train car's exterior was designed to reflect particular themed dungeons in the game.
We also have full menu functionality. What this means is that the game starts in the main menu, where you then have the option of starting the game, going to the options and changing the settings there, going into the credits, and quitting out. While playing the game, there's also a pause menu and a game over screen when you die.
These are some of our animated character sprites. All of them are animated, as you might see in some of the demo footage. The ember flickers and the purple monster has a bit of movement and hurtles projectiles. At our current state of production, we are utilizing in-house animation along with some free online assets.
So in general, for modeling, we kept our process pretty simple. The models themselves are pretty low poly. Detail pretty low, just to allow for quick iterations, and we allowed a lot of our detail to shine through our textures, which use an interesting kind of pixel art processing to allow them to look kind of retro and charming while still having the benefits of PBR.
Continuing with modeling, you can see to the top right an early version of our starter car, and to the bottom a more refined final version of our starter car. And then to the left you can see one of our 3D scalable assets, this one being a pedestal that holds items for players to collect. And it's designed the same way as all the other courses to establish a theme.
Here we have each of our levels in engine, with our player walking through each of them, with each level having lighting set up to give off the proper ambience feel for the player. And also throughout each level we have different random scatterable assets so that each time you play through the levels it's random every time. Now moving on to our gameplay and program mechanics, we have our basic movement system, which is WASD, and a dash that gives temporary invincibility frames so that the player can dodge attacks. And then on the right, we have our combat, which includes a light melee attack, a heavy attack, and a ranged attack for the player to use. Next, we have our currency system. We have two different currencies, the gold currency, which only lasts on the run that you are on, and the red currency that persists into further runs. And then we have the item system, which there are 8 different items. When you pick them up, each modifies a different stats, and they can drop from enemies or be bought with the gold currency. After that, we have our systems in which you can use your currency to buy items. We have our merchant, that one appears in the starter car that you can use your red currency at, and then randomly at the end of the levels he has a chance of spawning. And then we also have the item pedestal, that's one of our random scatterables that has a random item on it that you can purchase for a set amount of gold. Lastly, we have our 3 basic enemies. We have a light enemy, a medium enemy, and a heavy enemy. Each of them have varying HP and movement speed stats. And then we also have our final boss that we've begun programming and doing some work on, that will appear when the player is ready to end the run in the game.
We each learned some great lessons while working on this project, such as how to work under a contract in a professional setting, the agile workflow, how to control our scope and prioritize what we needed to, how to work in a team and adapt to each other, and individual skills for each of us in and out of Engine.